Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our next webinar. Today's webinar is presented by Tara Spalding, Managing Director of BoomStartup Accelerator. She will be providing a deep dive on special purpose vehicles, or better known as SPVs. Founded in 2010, BoomStartup Accelerator, a division of Assure, provides early stage growth and investment programs for startups. BoomStartup intends to be the most inclusive accelerator in the world by leveraging an open and opt-in format, distributing the traditional accelerator approach. BoomStartup provides learning opportunities and mentoring that assist first-time founders with business maturity guidance, investment preparation, capital structuring, and investment strategies. BoomStartup blends the flexibility and educational support native to online programs with human encouragement and hands-on expertise for their diverse business community. The result, an action-oriented, change-making ecosystem that provides an optimal path to success for startups. BoomStartup runs a rolling merit and participation funding program that formalizes a startup's first investment opportunity through SPVs powered by Assure. Prior to leading BoomStartup, Tara founded Henhouse Ventures in 2010, an early stage incubator that helps tech companies rapidly scale when entering massive markets, and is also on the board of trustees for venturecapital.org. She began her career in Silicon Valley as the first employee and eventually VP of marketing for industry-leading Sugar CRM, and also held executive roles at Groundwork Open Source, Magnet Systems, and BenchPick. Tara is the recipient of the 2010 Utah Business 30 Women to Watch Award and graduated from University of Colorado, Boulder. Just a few more things before we begin. We will be having a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions throughout Tara's presentation, just go ahead and enter them in the chat and we will address them during the last 5 minutes. All right, that's all for me. Over to you, Tara.
Kelsey, thank you so much for the introduction. It is my pleasure to be here today and to talk to the Utah business community about special purpose vehicles, and also talk to you all about BoomStartup Accelerator, as well as what to expect when fundraising. I hope that this is a very fun and helpful program for the next hour. I certainly encourage you to send Kelsey chat messages during the event if something I say is interesting or that you'd like me to elaborate or explain. I love this sort of engagement. It's important to me that you as the listener understand and are excited about what's ahead. So today I'm going to give a SPV deep dive for founders. I'm going to be covering an introduction as to who is BoomStartup. Kelsey did a great job of explaining it, but I'm going to show you a couple of really cool things, as well as talk about our parent company, which is Assure. And that too is based here in Utah, and in fact in Salt Lake. Also going to cover the art of fundraising. I have a couple of really key phrases to get you through all of the tough stuff. Plus, we're going to go through what to do to plan for fundraising, and also give you a heads up on fundraising complications and dead ends, because this in fact become time killers and money drains for startups. Then we're going to go into discussing a different paradigm when it comes to fundraising, which is direct versus indirect investment strategies. And this, of course, presents the opportunity to explain what an SPV is and that whole platform and what it does to affect your fundraising. Plus, we're going to go through how SPVs will show up on your cap tables, and also talk about the creation, funding, fees, and distribution process, that when you leverage SPVs as a founder, what to expect. Last and certainly not least is more about BoomStartup resources, because as Kelsey mentioned, we're an open and opt-in accelerator. Our programs are rolling, and we want to be the most inclusive program possible. If you haven't heard of BoomStartup Accelerator, well, welcome. We're 11 years old, and our mantra is to give you an aha moment when it comes to how to better run your company. We'll help you break through the barriers that are holding you back. We rely upon a really cool platform that tracks what you're doing and how your company is growing. And we also make suggestions on how to improve your growth rate and stability. Plus, we have a very viable community of mentors and early stage investors that are willing to jump in and help you out when you have a specific need in process. Last year was a banner year for BoomStartup Accelerator. We worked with over 1,000 companies on our online and inclusive programs, leading to many mentor and tools and advancements within the companies. We touched several different industries, as you can see, and that's because we're really focusing on the financial and business model more so than product market fit and go-to-market strategy. This also affords us the luxury to work with startups from around the world. Yes, indeed, we do have very strong Utah roots and communities, but 30% were from the rest of the world, which is a fantastic data point for us. And we measure success by basically providing you, the founder, learning opportunities and connections to assist you with business maturity guidance, investment preparation, capital structuring, and investment strategy. For a subset of those who are learning about this but are on the right sort of growth path, BoomStartup can actually vouch for your business as you participate and share your data with us over time. Additionally, a superset of you who are at an inflection point of high growth and are ready to raise equity-based capital, guess what? We'll help you close the first $100,000 in your first round. We deliver success because we have a funding-oriented program. Everything that we present and the speakers that we have on board are all about how to make your business grow. Plus, we're tracking your growth on our platform, and we're monitoring other pre-seed investment strategies. So if you're interested in information, contact us and we're happy to help you out. Plus, flexible and open investment rounds. We run 4 programs, and we'll go into these later, but they range from pitch competitions to 1-hour online webinars similar to this. And we also have week-long immersive sprints, and of course, our invite-only cohort for funding preparation. Now, onto the good part. This would not be possible without our parent company, Assure. If you haven't heard of Assure, they are the leading provider of special purpose vehicles. In fact, what this topic is all about. They are your outsourced solution for administrative and transaction services when it comes to fundraisings as well as exits. And they are the master of private investment marketplace. The Assure family goes beyond just SPVs and BoomStartup. In fact, we have Assure syndicates and Assure Analytics, as well as Glassboard. Now, on to the next point, which is the art of fundraising. I like to live my life by mantras and sayings. Sometimes it's cheesy, but oftentimes it's because there's really important truth to learn at the core. And the first one for founders is when it comes to fundraising, you are either raising funds or you are not. There is no try. So think of our good friend Yoda in his broken English, but very passionate heart. You're either going to be raising funds and addressing investors or not. It's very annoying to hear these conversations from founders of like, oh, I'm thinking about, or I'm considering, or someone said that they're interested or not. That is absolutely a problem because the founder is not ready to let go part of their company ownership and to actually make room from a leadership as well as a financial structuring standpoint for investors. So think of Yoda when it comes to fundraising. Either you are raising funds or you are not. There is no in between. And if you're a child of the 80s, then you probably recognize the A-Team and, of course, Hannibal Smith. And his favorite saying at the end of every show is, I love it when a plan comes together. And of course, it's Hollywood, but it's absolutely important that if you don't have a plan and you don't have the right team in place, then you're not going to get out of the sticky situation and win the day. So when it comes to fundraising, have a plan and make sure that you're surrounded with the right people. You'll often hear me say this, and I'm certainly not the one that coins it, but I use it the most, which is especially in early stage funding rounds, investors are betting on the jockey and not the horse. And if you haven't heard this phrase before, the jockey is you. the founder, the CEO, the decision maker. The horse is your company. It's the innovation. It's the widget that you think you're being funded on. Guess what? Winning records, of course, is important to the horse, but they always stick with the jockey. And the jockey is the one that negotiates the salary and the career when it comes to races. So when it comes to fundraising, you need to show and assert your leadership, your knowledge, and your ability to be coachable, especially in these early rounds. And of course, for my surfing friends, we all know when we just drop in a little bit too late and go over in a pearl, it's not fun at all. And of course, it's just because the timing wasn't right. You didn't read the waves right. And timing is certainly everything when it comes to fundraising. Oftentimes, we at BoomStartup see people that want to do fundraising because it's premature as to when they are going to get the most bang for their buck on pulling in investors. The other problem that we see is that founders in desperations are seeking investments when in fact they're not investable. And so these are two situations where timing could have been better. And again, it comes to the financial knowledge of how to run and scale your business, own that sort of leadership, and figure out, is it right for you to engage investors, or is it time to bail? So let's go on to planning for fundraising. BoomStartup's curriculum is all about this. But one thing that we often do in side conversations is really encourage the founder to think about how to decide when they should be fundraising. Back to the surfer scene. The first question that you need to answer is, why are you fundraising? And is this because it's a proactive stance that investment is going to radically grow your business? Or are you fundraising because the business isn't going right and you need more funds to keep it afloat? I promise you, 9 out of 10 companies fall into need funds to stay alive, and that's the wrong time for you to be fundraising. And in fact, you should consider other solutions, including possibly restarting your business if necessary. Now, is the timing for the fundraising best for you, or is it best for the investor? Because guess what? Investors really don't care if it's best for you. They want it to be at the most opportune point for them to invest into your company. And also, when you're deciding to fundraise as a founder, you need to know who is going to invest in you. And this goes back to strategically selecting and profiling your investors, because you know what? It's a lot more than money that you're pulling in. You're pulling in a part owner of your company, and they need to be strategically aligned and very well connected and proven in not only your market, but more importantly, your business model, because their connections, their experiences can help you scale and achieve your investment intentions. Now, do you have the money and the time to fundraise? What do you mean you need money to raise money? Well, it's on average between $20,000 and $100,000 that you will be spending from service providers to contractors and additional support, etc., to actually close a proper round. And many companies don't understand or realize the inclination of what they need to prepare. Additionally, it takes months to prepare before you begin fundraising. We've seen in the pre-seed space that it takes up to 4 months of preparation work, including growing the CEO's network with prospective investors to really make sure that when the go time is go, it goes smoothly. The less time that you give yourself to fundraise and to prepare for fundraise, it opens up more vulnerabilities and opens up more opportunity for you to not close the funding round. And then the other thing is your funding timeline flexible. And what I mean by that is if you need cash by X date or else you cannot pay the bills, this really puts you in a problematic state because the investment itself is no longer the backstop. It's the debt or the collectors, that is. And well, the flexibility shrinks. It puts you in a worse position to control better investment terms. And let me tell you, everything comes down to a negotiation, be it with pooling in debt or pooling in equity. You want to make sure that you're in control and have the most flexibility as possible. Now, the 5 stages of fundraising that BoomStartup emphasizes is first, viability preparation. And these are things such as the product market fit, product needs and market size, and go-to-market strategy. One thing that we hone in on, and we have a lot of open programs about, is early traction and adoption, as well as the competitive advantage. Because if these 2 components are there in the pre-seed round, that means you're onto something. That means that there's something that's beyond just an innovative widget. It's the start of a very sustainable business. Entity formation should be done after the viability is in fact solidified or onto something. And that's when, in fact, you incorporate the company, you get a tax ID, you open a bank account. But you also need to do very important things to set you up for funding, such as creating a cap table properly and getting agreements in place that protect your patents and your intellectual property. Also, you need to immediately start getting into the habit of tracking your financials on a monthly basis and your KPIs even on a daily basis, because this is the time in the early stage where you're monitoring your growth, you're understanding what's creating the business and driving the business change, and constantly doing science experiments so that you can improve the profitability, the go-to-market, or the adoption, or dropping costs that are the drivers behind your business. Then the capital planning needs to be done. And this is where you start saying, okay, how would I use an investment? And how much do I really need to use this investment? And what is that outcome that it will provide? Things such as pro formas that are based upon your historical financials, valuations, what's going on around you in the same market or with the same business model. And this will drive, in fact, the term sheet, how much ownership you're willing to give up for the inbound cash. And then this is also where you can start setting up that special purpose vehicle and also start beginning with your pitch deck and demo and investor profiling. Now, of course, everybody knows investment funding. Everybody's excited to throw out a pitch deck and talk to investors. But let me tell you, go back to the A team and start with a plan before you start these conversations. Because the worst thing to do is to have these conversations on a rolling basis without a sort of plan. And these are things where if you are going to file, like for example, with the SEC, and you're going to do a Reg D filing, meaning that you're getting accredited investors, where the SEC really does leave you alone compared to the other filings, then guess what? You need to do things such as KYC AML, which is Know Your Customer, and anti-money laundering aspects for every investment that you take in. Also, term negotiations, SPV onboarding, and transferring the funds are very important things that take time and take money. And then last, and certainly not least, and where many entrepreneurs go wrong, is they forget about the post-close activities. Continuing a relationship with your investment group is very important because you never raise just once. Trust me, equity capital is more addicting than Pringles. Oftentimes, we're asked at BoomStartup, how do you build the investment pitch? What do you do? I have a deck. Guess what? The deck is not where you start. In fact, what you start off with is your business financials. And if you're uncomfortable with business financials, then guess what? This is the very first place that you need to start. Because while you learn about how your business is running and how different aspects of your business can in fact change your future financials, you may find out that there are different capital resources that make more sense for you than going for equity. And there's nothing wrong with pursuing equity-based capital as well as other resources that are non-dilutive or debt-based. Second step is to figure out what are those activities that accelerate predictable growth. And even if you test it on a very micro level, it's still a test and it's still a result. And those savvy investors who are interested in your business, they're going to care about those information. So track it, know your KPIs, and know the cost drivers and the influencers thereof. So for point 3, are you in the top 10% of startups in your space? Honestly, out of the top 10%, 1 out of 10 actually get funded. The remaining 95% do not get funding. And so it may not be worth your time unless you're an overachiever and top. Sometimes we hear, well, how do I know? Leveraging a platform like BoomStartup that is checking on you on a quarterly basis and giving you feedback if you're on track or not for funding, we're one of those resources. But let me tell you, there's a lot of them out there, and there's many sort of reports that have basically tracked and measured different business models and industry growth, etc. And if you're not exceeding it, don't go down the path yet. It's not worth it. Now, how does the investment ask affect your pro forma and cap table? On average, rule of thumb, you want to give up around 20% of equity for every round that you go through as a founder. And if it's leaning towards more, like if you're up to 40%, then it's what we call a hostile investment. And if you have to take it, then you have to take it. But let me tell you, it certainly affects your pro forma and your cap table for future investment rounds. Number 5, what valuation range will you be at? Valuations are finicky. They're worse, in fact, than cats. And we had a very strong valuation closing off 2021. But with the state of economy as well as interest rates, guess what? Valuations are starting to soften in just the last month alone. So tracking valuation should just be as much as reading basically a weekly newsletter. And it's a very important aspect because as your financial investment matures, your valuation will be absolutely a negotiated point. You, as a leader, are what is going to basically close every investor into your company. So number 6 is so important. Your vision becomes your storyline, and your ability to say it, not show it, but to say it, reflects your ability to sell and to lead. If you need to work on your ability to speak and collect your ideas, that's the best investment possible. Because let me tell you, everything comes down to a conversation. Everything comes down to a relationship. And that never starts and stops in an email or in a slide deck. Number 7, build a deck that's only shared in meetings. I, running BoomStartup, get emailed a pitch deck practically every single day, even over the weekends. And you know what? It doesn't tell me anything about the jockey. It tells me nothing about the CEO. The CEO could have just used a template and outsourced someone for $30 an hour to put in numbers. Build a deck that's only shared in meetings. And by the way, make the deck as least amount of content as possible. So it's up to you as the presenter to give the narration, to show the excitement, and to really own what's happening and why someone wants to invest in you. Don't leave it up to words on a paper. Create a connection while you present. But what should you send investors before meeting them? Well, there's 2 things that are really popular. 1, a one-pager. It summarizes why investing in your company is a really great idea. 2, a video. Yes, turn that phone on, record yourself sharing your excitement between 30 and 60 seconds, and send that video to your investor that, by the way, the video mentions their name and why, in fact, they wanted to personally invest in you because of something that they've done in their past. Utilize video for customization. Utilize it to show your excitement, to show your personality, to get them excited to meet you and to see your deck. And of course, number 9, when you build your deck, script it. I see a lot of people that are really gifted at design, but sometimes forget to say important things. Yes, the script needs to come off not feeling like a script, but you should absolutely have it script where the big points that you want to make and people to retain are spoken and shown at the very beginning of each slide. And then last and not least, I think I repeated it enough here, but rehearse. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Even today, this morning, I spent 2 hours with different teams practicing their 10-minute pitch several times over and over and over again. And let me tell you, every time they speak, they get cleaner, more excited, and more convincing. The next piece for preparation is to prepare for the diligence process. So before you even speak to an investor, have these things ready to go, because if you get an investor that says, yes, I want to know more information, where are your financials? Can you show me your taxes for the last year? You don't need to take a moment of time to dig them up and find them and organize them and put them in a protected environment. Set up your deal room, put in that cap table, put in all the needed documents, your term sheets, the different filings, the IP, and your sales items and your marketing items. Have everything ready before you have these conversations. Additionally, for you yourself, have an investor outreach tracker. Start researching who should invest in your company and start creating a relationship with them before you even outreach. And then when you do outreach, put it on your personal tracker so that when you're in your 50th conversation, guess what? You can still remember what you said and what you promised to the 5th person that you pitched. And the most important thing is when you do engage investors, there are 3 different strategies. Who I have to tip my hat off to Ted Wang at Fenwick and West. He described them in 3 different approaches. And this is kind of like the investor sales pitch technique. I mean, what Ted did was amazing. But he basically said, you can start off with a horse race where all of the investors are lined up and the gates release them at once so that you can control the time and scale and basically leverage the excitement within each of the horses or each of the investors competing side by side. But if you're not in that top 5% of the companies, then guess what? You're probably going to be in the dog race or the poker game. And you should know the different sales strategies accordingly. For a dog race, it's not about the dogs. It's about the rabbit. And that rabbit is that really weird little fuzzy white thing that's led on a mechanical stick, well ahead of the investors who are following it. But that little rabbit is your first investor that agreed to the term sheet. Because if you don't have a term sheet, the horse race or the dog race just truly doesn't work. Term sheets create scarcity and urgency because guess what? Investors don't want to miss out on a great deal. Now, what happens if you don't have a term sheet? How do you do this? Well, polish up your poker skills because it's basically you squaring off with who you think is going to be the lead investor. And this is where the art of negotiation and letting go of responsibility and ownership can come in play. And you should be prepared for things such as, I'd invest in you, but I want a new leader, or I need to see this, or I want you to pivot. But the poker game is actually a very common sort of strategy, and it is certainly a one-on-one, highly trusted and private conversation. Now, you can't go from poker game to horse race because usually the person you negotiated with can easily walk away. But over time, by launching your investor outreach and your fundraising process, can be managed as a plan. Now, moving on to fundraising complications and dead ends. Pressures fall on the CEO after investors start the diligence process. These things are such as term sheet negotiations, which we were just highlighting, and cap table cleanup. Sometimes there's dead weight on the cap table or incomplete data that just doesn't make sense. And this can in fact affect your valuation and your percent of ownership. Also, the investor diligence, as I was mentioning before, is very, very important to make sure that in fact they are qualified to invest and that they don't have any investments in competitive products. Investment filings and documentation also takes up a whole bunch of time. And of course, investor calls, collections, payouts. This is all the stuff that you just have to handle for the fundraising process that in fact adds time, pulling you away from running your business, but into running the investment. Also, post-close activities, quarterly updates, and taxes and K1s basically elongate after you get it closed. You're still responsible and on the hook as an entity who received outside investment to complete and conclude correctly and by regulations. Now, for dead ends, don't get too excited when conversations and low commitment activities happen. I've had several entrepreneurs come to me, oh, this person reaches out to me, I'm very excited. You know, they want to hear my investor pitch. And I'm just like, hold on, are you sure you want to do this? Because right now it just feels like pitching them, but you're not in their bracket for the size of the amount that you're going to raise or for what your business is doing, or et cetera, et cetera. And so these are things that are time wasters and in fact can be problematic later on. So be careful with inbound investor inquiries. Make sure that if an investor is interested in you, you can ask why. Why are you interested in me? And you can also communicate, hey, I'm fundraising now, or hey, I'm not fundraising now, but happy to create a relationship and a level of trust so that when and if the moment is right, we can have a real investment conversation. The other thing that happens, and especially here in Utah, is rosy feedback is given, yet there is no follow-up items. There's no next steps. This is kind of the kiss of death. People don't want to critique you, but there's something going on either with what you presented or what they're dealing with their existing portfolio or fund management that there isn't a fit. If there are no next steps, it's dead. And that's totally fine. BoomStartup had 18 companies in 2021 that closed 22 funding rounds. Guess what? We had several companies that pitched up to, between 80 and 120 investors. Pitching investors is, no kidding, a full-time job. And it was smart of these companies to figure out like, yep, I pitched, but it's not going to work because they haven't followed up with me. If they follow up, respond as quickly as possible and as honest as possible. The other thing that happens, and this is to my dear friend Peter Collister at venturecapital.org, he was like, you know, when entrepreneurs ask for funding, they get advice. When entrepreneurs ask for advice, they get funding. So if you do a pitch and you get advice as to what to do next, you're not going to get funding. But honestly, back to Peter's point, if you can create a relationship and start asking for advice on how your company is going, etc., and they're like, hey, I'm seriously interested in investing in you, that is a true lead. And then, of course, interest from a non-experienced or accredited source. Now, this is something that's happening because there's a lot of people who are now able to be accredited investors, yet they don't have an investment thesis and they don't know exactly what they're doing yet. So they may be very excited to support you, but they don't have the experience to walk you through. Now, you need to make sure that you cut this with a really sharp knife as to, is this someone that can be an investor where there's a different person as a lead investor setting the terms to soften any sort of concerns or delays because of the lack of leadership. Finding investors who know how to lead rounds is a gift. And of course, interest from competitive investors are a certain problem. Just shake them off. Don't do that, because they do want to see your financials. And of course, watch out for the hostile terms and conditions, where they're just asking for too much of your company or shortening the timelines where it's just not conducive. Now, on to SPVs. The commonest of SPVs is the concept between direct versus indirect investing. When you are the CEO, it is, of course, important for you to create and maintain investor relations. But do you want to maintain and lead these investor relationships through the entire fundraising process? Some of them, absolutely yes, because again, they are the lead or strategic investor, and they could potentially advise you not only on this round, but future rounds as well. There's a separate and a second sort of group called indirect investment, investor management, which is done through an investor organizer. Yes, you still have a relationship with each and every investor in it, but when it comes to the details of collecting the checks, merging the bank accounts, making sure that the ownership and the allocations are properly done, that's where an organizer comes in, kind of like an administrator for you to come in and just handle all of those sorts of financial aspects, from money collections to taxes. And this is the beginning of SPVs. SPVs actually started off in the 70s and were very common for like real estate. And now SPVs are very, very popular when it comes to company investments. So what are SPVs and how does it affect fundraising? SPVs is a business entity specifically created for a designated purpose, and it protects assets and isolates liabilities from the investors, okay? So SPVs are operated or organized by a separate entity. Yes, we do see entrepreneurs be SPV organizers, but oftentimes they want to offload that onto a reputable group who can also bring in outside investment. Also, SPVs allows investors to pool their funds together. And we'll show you in a moment why that's very helpful. And it also calls the capital that's going to be going into your company up front. So you know exactly what you're getting in the SPV because that is exactly what the amount is confirmed as. Plus, SPVs remove audit and financial statement obligations. So you don't need to be working with each and every investor. In fact, you just give your information to the organizer and the organizer distributes the information thereof. Plus, if in the future there's unique waterfall provisions, SPVs can handle that. And it allows organizers to carry interest, management fees, or not. Plus, SPVs handle the regulatory requirements for filing when it comes to the SEC, and that takes a lot of weight off of your back. Additionally, it does the annual taxes, the K-1s, investment transfers. So if one person wants to give ownership, their ownership to someone else, or if there's a separate transaction within the SPV, it never affects your business cap table. And of course, the SPVs handles the distributions. And if your company doesn't work out, it handles the shutdowns as well. So how do SPVs work? Because I'm often asked this. The investors basically pool their cash into the SPV and they get an ownership percent of the SPV, which is often LLC. The SPV basically signs the term sheet for all of the investors that participate in the SPV. And that's where they get the security terms and also the price. So it works with price rounds, it works with safe agreements, it works with convertible notes. The term sheet that has controlling the securities for the price is your gateway from your company on how much allocation that you're giving up of ownership. And so that's how the cash just clearly transfers from the SPV to your company. SPV mitigates investment risk and, as we mentioned, liability. And it also simplifies the fundraising process because, again, our point is to pull your investors together and go through the fundraising process at once instead of elongated over time, because timing is everything and you need to control your dog race. Also, it scales the investor group. So you can have an investor that's writing a $10,000 check sit alongside an investor with a $50,000 check. The allocations are proportional as to what they contribute, yet you're not seeing all of these sorts of breakdown. Plus, for you, it reduces investor engagement. You're not following up with each of these investors, asking for their bank accounts and to sign forms and to make sure all of the good stuff is in a row. Also, it allows the SPV to hit your minimum investment requirement. So if you say, minimum is $50,000 check, SPVs can get multiple people to participate or pull them together to hit that minimum. And of course, it simplifies the cap table, which we'll go into next. If you heard of SPVs outside of commercial real estate or large assets, they're also used for fund management. So VCs use SPVs to basically invest in more companies and to handle rolling funds. So these are the three commonly used SPVs, primarily for entrepreneurs on the early pre-seed stage. We're looking at single SPVs, but they're all multi-asset and traditional or fund management SPVs too. So why SPVs? It helps companies attract investors. It simplifies and streamlines the process. It pulls together the money and it flattens the terms within the ownership group. When to use SPVs? Well, if you received several direct checks and you've closed that round, it's very, very difficult to then consolidate that money that you got into an SPV. The best practice is to do it before you close the round and to have the people send their money into the SPV, which then transfers to your company, agreeing to the term sheet. It also helps limiting the rights on the investment round. And also it can help with satisfying the minimum investment requirement, as we talked about. So cap tables and SPVs, this is where things become really, really pretty. I'm going to show you through an example. We have Acme Core that's raising their pre-seed safe agreement $500,000 round. They have a $5 million valuation cap. And so the SAFE agreement, that's the investment instrument. That's awesome. But how does the money get into it? Well, the first $100,000 is coming from 7 different people. 2 of them are in the friends and family, and 5 of them are individual angel investors. Well, that's great and awesome. If you spin up an SPV for this first $100,000, to consolidate these 7 people into one entity, this can be your very first tranche. When the last dollar of that $100,000 is invested into the SPV, and this can lock into the pre-seed safe agreement investment instrument terms, guess what? You can close it and transfer that $100,000 into your company. Then you open up tranche 2. Well, this is a micro venture group that you targeted 4 months before you even began fundraising. And they just heard that you got your first $100,000. Guess what? They'll do the next $250,000 for you. How flippin' awesome is that? But they don't want to be going through SPV because guess what? They want to be on the cap table and perhaps they're negotiating information or pro rata or possibly a board seat, etc. That's fine. That can be a direct investment. And then for that remaining $150,000, maybe you have investment stragglers that are coming in on that sort of poker game, right? And they're just afraid of missing out of this great deal. So it can be trust funds, family offices. Those three individuals can roll up into an SPV vehicle as well. So you can turn on and off SPVs during your investment round. There's a couple of tricks. First off, you can only have 99 investors in all of your SPVs for that specific investment instrument. Okay, so the cap table is then simplified because what would have happened below that preferred shares line where it says SPV1, micro VC, and SPV2, there would have been 11 lines of the friends and family, angel investors, and the family offices, as well as that micro VC listed. Guess what? This is just more junk on your cap table to have problems. The SPVs, in fact, consolidated, so you went from 11 to 3 lines. And this is how you keep a clean cap table. All right, SPV creation, funding, fees, and distribution. The creation process is super duper easy thanks to BoomStartup's parent company, Assure. As I said earlier, Assure is the leading SPV provider in the United States, and they basically have Glassboard, or a platform that automates all of this. In fact, Assure has closed over 7,000 SPVs and easily do a couple hundred every single month. It's crazy. But they do and create the SPV, the bank account incorporation for that LLC, create your funding documents so that whomever comes in has proper ownership, and handles that investor onboarding, including the KYC AML, and any sort of audits necessary. Plus, the platform also handles the term sheet, purchase agreement, and signatures, and then it does the payouts as well as the distributions when you exit, and it also does all the wire funds because everybody's bank account is attached. So hats off to Assure to make this easy, because if you were to hire a legal and financial or tax team to do this, it would be easily $80,000 every single time. Now, also, SPVs improve investor relationships on an ongoing basis. As mentioned, the information rights, you as a company can keep the organizer updated, who then updates all of the investors in the SPV through the deal room. Plus, any sort of company updates, investment dashboards, or updates, etc., that too is happened on the deal room. When it comes to transfers of ownership, meaning, let's say one of the angel investors basically needs to bow out, but another family member wants to spin in. It's all handled on the platform. It's not the company's responsibility, and it doesn't kick off things like a 409 valuation request because the cap table is changing. And then also SPVs, especially how Assure has it handled, it works on all the annual taxes and the filings. It's all automated and audited as well. And of course, SPVs cover the blue sky fees. As for the fees itself, well, they start at $4,000 for a simple single asset SPV. And of course, the fees go up from there. SPV fees are calculated when all of the money is committed and transferred into the SPVs. The high end of the range for a single asset goes up to, I believe, $11,000 for the single asset. And then once the fees are paid, then the funds are transferred to the entrepreneur's bank account, and the SPV signs the term sheets, purchasing agreements, so all of the SPV's legal records are reflected properly on the cap table. Now, let's fast forward a few years and your company gets acquired. Well, how do the investors in the SPVs get paid out? Well, this is really cool. The SPV does all the payouts and the allocations according to the original consent, And then the SPV itself is dissolved because no longer need that entity to protect the liability. So going a little bit more into detail about the investment distribution, if you were to do this as a direct investment, it is up to you and your legal and your tax firm to make sure that your accounting firm, that you're doing everything right, as well as the tax firm to record it properly as well. But capital distribution is triggered when the SPV is closed and the money is basically wired into the SPV banking account. Plus the closing and taxing and filings, the SPV will automate this before all the payouts are done. For closing fees, if it's a single asset, there's no fees. But if it's multiple assets and it's more complicated, it can go up to a couple $1,000s. And payouts and management fees are in fact automatically calculated and withdrawn depending on how the SPV parameters are written. All right, a couple more minutes about BoomStartup. As mentioned, we provide early stage growth and investment programs for startup. If you like how I've narrated today and just kind of broken through what to get ready when it comes to fundraising and how to think about investor management, guess what? This is what the majority of our programs are about. And I'd like to invite you to participate in our program. As Kelsey mentioned, BoomStartup is the most inclusive accelerator in the world because our programs are all virtual and they're opt-in. And we really do focus on early stage growth and investment strategies. And listen, we know not every company can raise capital through equity, but we do think every company can be sustainable. And our open and opt-in format is super fun. So you can join at any time, participate in any sort of program, when in fact it can help you as a founder achieve your goals. And of course, we're not structured, so we can only suggest paths to success. We can only set up meetings with our mentors and provide tools through our marketplace at a discounted rate, but it's up to you to use them and it's up to you to ask for questions. We're not controlling and we do not have equity in your company. The 4 programs that I mentioned before is Open Up. These are our 1-hour online webinars and toolkits to help you with your viability and your preparation. These are most often free. Anybody can join at any time. We also have a very strong mentor matching. So if you attend a webinar, you get to meet the expert and work with them afterwards, which is fantastic. Also, we have online toolkits and recommendations as well. Then Pitch Up is our pitch competition. We host these twice a year, and get ready because we're going to make an announcement about this real soon. I'm so excited. But these global start pitch competitions award prizes such as cash. I mean, who doesn't need cash? And services, and of course, fame and fortune. Not only to the winners, but also to the finalists, because these categories that we do are very exciting and important for the future of innovation. Also, our Pitch Up competition really focuses entrepreneurs on advanced business planning and the strategy. So it's not just about how cool is the widget. It's really, can you get your head around this idea and turn it into a business? And we have so many tools and mentors to help you get there. Now, it's also a really cool global stage for leading to your network expansion. Our Pitch Up finals are live. They're broadcasted, just kind of like what we're doing right here. And it is amazing how many people, hundreds of people watch this live. And then, you know, people will get reached out to and contacted. Like it's super great. Now, Rise Up, these are our 1-week sprints. There are fees associated with them, but they're pretty low. And it's a week-long virtual sprint where an expert leads you through education as well as a practice and an application on how to fix something not going right in your business. In fact, we have a Rise Up coming up about product market fit and really getting your head into use cases to see if in fact things are happening frequent enough for you to build a business upon, or should you keep on digging? And these are expert-led, and you're basically getting a fractional executive for the week. And it's wonderful hands-on hands as well as other founder engagement. And we also have a lot of discounted marketplace offerings to get you through these moments too. And we really focus on goals and accountability. And then last and certainly not least, and I encourage every single person on this webinar to do, is to sign up and begin the process for Amplify Up. This is our funding program. We want to be your provider for the first meaningful capital boost for that moment where you're ready to just light that rocket fuel. Our Amplify Up program is an invite only, but it is an open online application process, and it's a 12-week cohort, and we just put you through the ringer. I mean, let me tell you, those 10 steps on how to build a fundraising plan, yep, that's what we do, and then some. And we also become your SPV organizer and then introduce you to our demo day. So our group of trusted investors and accredited investors to look at your pre-seed deal. So that is us. If you have any questions, feel free to contact myself. Christina Neild is also available at any time. And Kelsey, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Tara, we actually have a few questions. Our first one is from an anonymous viewer, and they would like to know, what would you use as a deal room and what software would you use for outreach tracking and keeping term sheets and documents in one place?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Deal rooms are really important. And, you know, the thing is it really depends on security and control that you want to do. You can actually start off with something as simple as Dropbox and just change your sort of securities as well as expiration for who specifically can come in and what are their sign-ons. But then there are some fantastic other dedicated programs like Carta, for example, that have deal rooms included on their platform. But honestly, the deal room is very important for you to maintain, not only from making sure that the documents in there are up to date, but making sure you don't want anybody in there that shouldn't be in there. And then, like, after you do meetings and after you get a no or a quiet or a silent response, get them out. Don't let them come back. You got to remember to delete people. The second part of the question is what to do with your investor list. And this is actually something that we emphasize at BoomStartup to start immediately. It could be, again, as simple as a Google Sheet, or you can get a very simple CRM solution to do something. But the first thing that you need to do is create a list and figure out who they are and why it would be a good fit. There are several tools out there like Signal, for example, or Crunchbase that you can do free lookups that can start helping you out. F-Success is another solution, but you need to be able to extrapolate and just really track who these investors are, what companies they've invested in, the types of deals they like to get in, the size of checks they like to write, or the rounds they like to be in, and then start building relationships with them. Do not spray and pray, meaning do not send them your pitch deck or ask for money out of the gate and do it in bulk. That's not how you create a relationship. That is not how you show that you are a leader and that you are a jockey that they should invest in.
All right, last question from Francisco. Would you advise founders to create an SPV for individual investors?
Yes, so great question. You can create an SPV to consolidate investors. If there's an investor who you do not want to be on your cap table for any sort of reason, because they're unknown and you think it can in fact hurt your future strategic investment round, it's fine to consolidate a single or two individuals into an SPV just because of what it could look like in the future. So the answer is yes. I've seen an SPV close with 3 investors writing each $10,000 checks, but hey, it's $30,000 instead of 0. Great question.
All right, that was the last question we had. So thank you so much, Tara, for this informative and engaging webinar. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. If you did have another question that you didn't have a chance to type, you can go ahead and contact us at utahbusiness.com and we'll put you in touch with Tara. Have a great rest of your day and don't miss our next webinar. Thanks again, everyone.